Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. I'm glad you're here with us. Well, if you were here last week, you may remember that we talked primarily about J.B. Phillips' little book, the classic book entitled Your God is Too Small, and some of the images that he says are inadequate ways to understand God. Now, I'm not going to summarize all those, at least not in detail, but we'll put maybe some idea of the variations that we heard about then. For example, there was the sense that he talked about is that as children, we often develop our images of God based on our parents. And we see the characteristics or the impression that our parents make on us, and we then transfer that. We apply that to God as well. So that was one of the things he talked about. Then there were two that are kind of like opposing views. One is that God is in charge of everything that happens and orchestrates it all. And then there's the opposite viewpoint that God doesn't have anything to do with anything and doesn't really care much for us. And then there was something that was some simulation of the fact that God is at our beck and call, will keep us from all harm, and will grant our every wish. Now, I suspect I ask you to kind of think about your own images of God and how you see God. How do we depict God for ourselves? And my guess is you had some variation on those, or maybe something a little different. But probably I hope that you took some time to think about it. And today I want us to think again about that whole idea. And I'm going to share some of my thoughts along with some people who are way wiser than I am. I guess I have to say that, it's pretty presumptuous of me to even think I could begin to describe God, because like all of us, I'm just a human being, and my understanding is very limited. It's finite, and I probably know as much about the reality of God as one of those little tiny bumps on a thimble, the teeniest, tiniest little bump there is. That's probably it. And furthermore, I guess I would have to say that my images of God have changed. There's been transition over the years. And I trust that that's going to continue, because I think that's the process of life, that we grow and change and evolve and come to new discoveries and new understandings and gain new insights in the course of life. So at least I hope it's not done yet. I'm assuming there's a lot more to come. Now, frankly, in thinking about the images of who God is, even if just in the ways it's described in the Bible, we could go on ad infinitum. I mean, it's unbelievable the number of ways in which God is referred to. And there's probably 100 different Bible passages I could have used. I didn't use any of them because I thought it was easier just to name some of the ways. So listen up. These are some of the ways that some of the writers in the Bible have depicted God. As shepherd, bread, father, mother, midwife, a woman in labor, an eagle, one who carries us, our helper and deliverer, light and sun, shield, creator, refuge, king, fire, word, spirit, potter, educator, water, love, friend, and dove. And I suspect there are way more that I didn't get on the list. In addition to that, theologians and philosophers and authors and playwrights have actually created images of God or used different ways to depict God. For example, Harriet Beecher Stowe said, "God has always been to me not so much like a father as like a dear and tender mother." A theologian that I respect a great deal is Sally McFague. And in her one of her books, she refers to God as Mother, Father God, which I kind of like as well. And somebody last week when she went out said to me, maybe it would be easier to not image God as an old man with a white beard and long flowing robes in heaven if we didn't always hear Father used in reference to God. And sometimes people will take that back to the term that Jesus used to refer to God, which was Abba. And Abba was not meant to have anything to do with gender of God. It was very culturally and contextually used at that given time. And it was meant to denote the nature of the relationship with God, because Abba would be like daddy, or mommy. It's that close, loving, safe, nurturing relationship that a parent has with the child. So that, the mother-father God probably is a little broader way to think about understanding that. There's another way that God is understood as well. For example, the author and priest Henri Nouwen said this: "The unfathomable mystery of God is that God is a lover who wants to be loved." Sallie McFague talks about that as well. She talks about God as the ultimate lover. Now just think about that. Can you imagine what that's like, to be loved by the ultimate lover, to be affirmed, respected, valued, honored, accepted just as we are? It's a remarkable way to think about God experiencing us and our experience of God. It's a pretty awesome way to think about it, I think. Something else that McFague talks about, she talks about God as the ultimate lover, but she also talks about God as friend. And I kind of like that too, because when I think about the word friend and think about those who are friends, I get this warm feeling, this feeling that we're kind of in this together, that we're making it through life together, kind of supporting one another, partnering with one another in whatever way we can, just to be here for one another. And that's a sense I have of God, that ongoing presence that's with us no matter what we experience. So Sallie McFague's ideas of God as mother, father, lover, and friend certainly maybe open a door for some different kind of understanding of who God is and what God is like. One of the images I have of God is of God as creator. And, I'm not sure I can tell you exactly what I mean by that, but I go back to the first verse of the first chapter of Genesis, which simply begins with the words, "In the beginning, God." And that's what I believe, that somehow before anything else, God was. And God has grown in our awareness, but never has always been. And how that translates, I guess, to today is based on something Alfred North Whitehead said, which was this: God is the abiding source of all new possibility. What that says to me, as I try to understand that, is whenever we come up with a new idea or get a fresh insight into a plaguing problem, or whenever something comes together in a new combination, in a new way, that's the creative energy of God. That's the creative activity of God. And that, to me, is a powerful way to understand God. There's something else I believe pretty strongly, and that is that God is a God of relationship. I think you and I are people, at least most of us, yearn for a relationship with God, for connection with one another, and what I believe is very closely connected then to our relationship with God. And it causes me to wonder, if God is a God of relationship, one who wants relationship with us, if maybe that seed, that yearning for connection, isn't something God planted within us. And yet, how does that relationship with God work? Well, I think God's love is freely given and can be freely accepted or rejected. In other words, I believe that you and I are created with free will. That means we have the freedom to choose to turn toward God or to turn away from God. And God will not change that. God does not force or coerce us into that relationship, because a forced love or coercion is not love. It's power, it's control, but it's not love. And God doesn't do that. God just simply loves and wants more than anything for us to connect, but will never ever force us to do so. I guess when I think about that, it reminds me of a story I read a long time ago. It was about a Welshman who, for 40 years, once a week, had put a love note under the door of his neighbor's home. They had had a falling out all those years before, and she refused to speak with him at all. So after 40 years, the then 74-year-old man went to her door, knocked on it, asked her to marry him, and she said yes. Well, I think that's maybe the way God is. God, all through life, is slipping us love notes, slipping us love notes. Then God is also knocking on our door, asking us to open and hoping we will. I think that's very much a part of who God is. Well, from, I guess, all those things you've heard me say, you probably understand that I think God's very personal. God is not remote and distant, but very personal, very much wants to connect with us. And so God is not out there somewhere, remote, not at all connected with us. Instead, God is right here. In fact, more and more, I believe God is as present as the air we breathe, all around us and within us. And wherever we are, God is. And God is not so much apart from us as a part of us. I believe that each of us contains that spark of God-likeness, that spark of divinity, that spark of God within us, that we are simply on a journey to uncover and discover and reveal and share with the world. The theologian Paul Tillich talked about God being the ground of our being. And he said that we know God when we have that sense of being grounded and centered. And I believe that's right. Somehow, as we kind of move our way through life, though, we kind of get mixed up. We get confused. And we're not always sure of where we are or where God is or what God is like. And yet, if we think back, children sometimes come up with some pretty profound understandings. There's an old book that's entitled The Spiritual Life of Children. It's by Robert Coles, who was a child psychologist and an author. And in that book, he interviewed children. He asked children about their views on God, and about life, and about religion. And they shared a lot of different things and interesting perspectives. For example, one child, when asked about God, said God was half girl and half boy. Another child said that God was like a cloud. And yet another child said that God wasn't a person at all, but was like air. And I kind of liked that. And as I thought about that, I remembered where that image first came to me, that understanding first came to me. I think I've shared this with you before, but it's been a long time. A number of years ago now, I was at a United Methodist Clergy Women's Consultation. And this is a gathering of clergy women from all over the world. And in the course of the 3 or 4 days that we spend together, we get to experience worship time with people from very different cultures from ours. And one of those particular ones that I remember most vividly was one being conducted by the Native American women. I don't remember much else about it except this one part. And there were 2 women who were walking around the room toward those of us and around those of us who were gathered. And one woman had a bowl, and there was something like smoke coming out of that bowl, but it wasn't smoke. It didn't smell like smoke, and it wasn't bad at all. It wasn't something you pulled back from. And I don't know exactly what it was. And the other woman had a feather. And the 2 of them walked together, and one would take the feather and wave it, and then this smoke-like essence would come over us, all of us. And sometime in the midst of this, somebody over there started singing the words of an old song. The words are these: "Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me." And I got it. That was God to me, and that image has stayed with me all these years. But as I said last week, and I'll repeat again this week, it really doesn't matter where I come down. What matters is each one of us and our own experience of God. And as I thought about a Bible passage for today that could speak to us, the best one I came up with is one of the verses out of Psalm 46. The psalmist said this: "Be still and know that I am God." And I truly believe that if we are still, we will